The last thing I saw before the radiation tech slid the mask over my face was Barbara's back disappearing down the hallway, her phone already pressed to her ear. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't even look at me. The machine started up, buzzing and clicking, drowning out everything but the memory of her perfume in the air and the cold ache in my chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip the mask off and chase after her, demand an explanation, but my body was too weak and my voice never made it past my throat. The nurse tried to make small talk as I waited for the next round, asking if there was someone coming to pick me up. I lied and said yes. In reality, Jenny would show up when she could, her hair tied back, always carrying soup or some dumb magazine she thought would make me laugh. She never stayed long enough to watch me fall apart, but she always came back. Jenny knew how to show up, even if she never knew what to say. But Barbara, she was the one who promised to be by my side, the one who said sickness and health didn't scare her. It turns out she just wanted the parts that didn't look ugly in photos. I went through the motions, letting the doctors poke and prod me, letting the days slip by. I scrolled through old messages from Barbara, rereading promises she never intended to keep. She'd stopped texting after the second week of treatment. Jason's name started popping up more and more on her social media. They went to brunch, to a concert, and posted photos with mutual friends. I tried to pretend it didn't hurt, but every update felt like a punch to the gut. When I finally asked her if she was coming by, her reply was a single sentence. "You don't need me to hold your hand, John, you're stronger than this." I spent hours alone in that apartment, watching sunlight crawl across the floor, listening to the drip of the kitchen faucet. My parents called every day. I from out of state, asking how I was holding up, offering to come and stay. I told them I was fine, that Barbara was looking after me, that I didn't need anything. It was a lie I kept telling myself, hoping that if I said it enough, it might become true. One day, between appointments, Jenny showed up at my door with groceries and a small envelope. She didn't say anything at first, just put the food away and sat on the couch. Finally, she asked, "Are you going to let her keep doing this?" I didn't know what to say. I shrugged, staring at my hands, wishing for some answer that didn't make me sound weak. Jenny shook her head, frustration in her eyes. "She left you at the hardest part. If that isn't a sign, I don't know what is." Before she left, she pressed the envelope into my hand. "You should open this," she said. Inside was a letter from a company I'd almost forgotten about, a job offer dated the week before my first radiation session. I hadn't replied. I hadn't even thought about work. I Googled the company out of curiosity and saw Barbara's latest update. "Dream job interview next week. Wish me luck." Jason had already commented, "You'll crush it." The universe has a sense of humor, I guess. Barbara had spent months preparing for this opportunity, practicing interviews in front of the mirror, asking me for advice I could barely give between hospital visits. I looked at the offer letter again, ran my finger over the company logo, and felt something in me click. Maybe I couldn't make Barbara stay, but I could decide what happened next. That night, I emailed HR to accept the position. The recruiter responded almost immediately, excited to have me on board, asking if I could start the following Monday. I said yes, surprising even myself. The next morning, I put on my best suit, the one Barbara had picked out for my last birthday, and practiced my smile in the bathroom mirror, ignoring how tired my eyes looked. Jenny texted me a picture of coffee and a sunrise. "Go remind them who you are," she wrote. I arrived at the office 10 minutes early. The lobby was packed with nervous candidates. I recognized Barbara's laugh before I saw her. She stood at the check-in desk, Jason's hand on her shoulder, her eyes bright with ambition. She turned and saw me, her expression freezing for a split second before she forced a smile. "John? What are you doing here?" I held up the offer letter. "Just starting my first day," I said, keeping my voice even. Jason looked away. Barbara didn't say another word. I walked past her into the elevator, my heart pounding, the ache in my chest suddenly lighter than it had been in weeks. Maybe Barbara never wanted to see the hard parts of my life, maybe she never wanted me at all, but I was done waiting for her to come back. I had a future, and I was claiming it for myself. I always thought I understood Barbara. From the first day we met, it seemed like we were written into each other's futures. College orientation was a blur, but she stood out, confident, a little too loud, smiling with her entire face, and somehow she managed to remember everyone's name, even mine. I was the opposite, quiet, always clutching a notebook, hoping no one would notice I was nervous. We ended up in the same group for a freshman project, and she sat beside me in the library, scribbling hearts in the margins of her notes and nudging my elbow whenever I looked too serious. She liked to tease me about my handwriting, the way I'd tap my pen when I was thinking. Back then, Barbara made everything feel like an adventure, even a late-night cram session fueled by vending machine coffee. We started dating halfway through sophomore year. It wasn't a big romantic confession, just a slow slide from friendship into something more complicated. Our first official date was cheap burgers and a late movie, sharing fries and inside jokes about our professors. She reached for my hand when we left the theater, her palm warm and certain. For a long time, I thought holding on to her meant holding on to the life I wanted. The more we grew up, the more our differences seemed like strengths. I was patient and methodical, good at listening and keeping secrets. Barbara was spontaneous, hungry for new experiences, always pushing us out of comfort zones. If I wanted a quiet night in, she'd talk me into rooftop parties or last-minute road trips. We had our rituals too, Sunday mornings in bed with coffee and crossword puzzles, afternoons wandering the farmer's market, late-night walks when neither of us could sleep. She'd pull me into the rain without an umbrella and laugh when we both ended up soaked. Sometimes, when she was tired or worried, Barbara would curl into me and let herself be small, her bravado falling away. She'd whisper her dreams into the dark, and I'd promise to be there, whatever came next. For a while, that promise was enough. By the time we both finished college, Barbara was making plans for the future faster than I could keep up. She landed her first job at a tech startup, all glass walls and kombucha on tap, while I took a quieter route, research assistant at the university, then graduate school. She was always chasing something, promotions, recognition, the next big thing. She told me once that standing still felt like drowning. "John, you're the only thing in my life that doesn't change," she said one night, her voice thick with exhaustion. I need that. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. My parents loved her in their own cautious way. My mom called Barbara a firecracker, a word she'd never used for anyone else. Dad thought she was too ambitious, too restless, but he respected her drive. Holidays became a performance, Barbara charming everyone at the table, steering conversations, promising to teach my little cousin how to code. She remembered birthdays, sent thank you notes, and brought fancy desserts. It was impossible not to be swept up in her current, even when I felt like I was losing my own voice in the noise. The cracks showed gradually. Barbara's job consumed her, and late nights at the office became more common. She called less, answered texts with quick emojis or one-word replies. When we did see each other, she was tired or distracted, always checking her phone, always half a conversation away from the rest of her world. I didn't know how to ask for more. When I finally landed my dream job, an offer from a respected company, something I'd worked years for, she was happy for me, but the celebration was short-lived. She was already talking about her next promotion, about how she'd outgrow her current role. Still, I clung to the version of us I remembered. There were moments when the old Barbara would shine through, a spontaneous weekend trip, a lazy morning in bed, a look that made me feel like I was still the center of her universe. I convinced myself those moments were enough, that the distance between us was temporary, that she'd come back to me once her life slowed down. But Barbara was never going to slow down. She wanted more from life than I could give her, and deep down, I think I knew that. When I was first diagnosed, I didn't tell anyone. The word cancer felt like a curse, something I could keep at bay if I didn't say it out loud. I started treatment quietly, letting Barbara believe my fatigue was from long hours at work. Jenny figured it out first. She'd always been able to read me better than anyone. Jenny was the kind of friend who showed up when she was needed, no questions asked. We'd grown up together, played on the same soccer team as kids, even shared detention once for talking too much during math class. As we got older, Jenny became my safe space, someone who never expected me to be anything other than myself. Jenny and Barbara had met a few times, always circling each other like wary cats. Jenny thought Barbara was too flashy, too quick to dismiss anything she didn't understand. Barbara, for her part, was polite but distant, never quite letting Jenny in. I never pushed them to get along. My life had enough friction without forcing two different worlds to merge. When I told Barbara about the diagnosis, she was quiet for a long time. She hugged me, whispered that she loved me, and promised to be there for every step. But it was a promise that faded with each appointment, each round of radiation. She tried in the beginning, bringing food, holding my hand in the waiting room, making jokes to lighten the mood. But the harder it got, the less she showed up. Work came first. She was slammed with deadlines, buried in meetings, always apologizing, always swearing she'd make it next time. I pretended it was fine. I told her I understood. The day she left for good, it was raining. She'd come to the hospital after a meeting, makeup perfect, a new coat slung over her arm. She kissed my forehead, told me she'd be back soon, and walked out before the nurse called me in for treatment. I watched her go, thinking maybe I'd see her waiting when I came out. Instead, Jenny was there, umbrella in hand, waiting by the elevator. Jenny didn't say anything, just wrapped me in a hug and waited until I was ready to move. After that, Barbara's calls stopped altogether. She posted photos from restaurants and rooftop bars, Jason's name tagged more and more often. Jason had been a friend of Barbara's from work, a guy who made her laugh, who understood her ambition, who seemed to fit the version of herself she wanted to be. I saw them together once, weeks before she left me, talking in the lobby of her building. They looked comfortable, like two people who didn't have to explain anything to each other. It stung, but I told myself I was imagining things. Jenny stayed. She brought groceries, cleaned my apartment, and drove me to appointments. She sat in waiting rooms, reading quietly, never asking for more than I could give. Sometimes she'd show up with pizza and a stack of movies, and we'd watch until I fell asleep on the couch. Jenny never pushed. She never pretended things were fine when they weren't. She just stayed, and that was enough. My parents offered to come, but I told them to stay put. I didn't want them to see me like this, thin, tired, drifting between hope and fear. Barbara never saw that version of me either. She left before the worst of it, before the hair loss and the nights I couldn't sleep. In the end, maybe that was for the best. I started piecing my life back together during recovery. I focused on what I could control, my health, my friendships, my work. When I opened that job offer, it felt like a sign that life wasn't over, that I could still move forward. Accepting it was more than just a career move, it was a declaration that I wouldn't let Barbara's absence define me. The morning I walked into the office for my first day, I felt something I hadn't in months, a spark of excitement, a sense of possibility. The past was still there, but it wasn't holding me back anymore. I saw Barbara in the lobby, her expression shifting from shock to something colder. Jason hovered by her side, suddenly unsure. Jenny's text popped up on my phone, "You've got this." I smiled, tucked my phone away, and walked forward. For the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I needed to be. The hospital became my second home, though it never felt like one. The routines blurred into each other, the sting of antiseptic, the chill of early morning appointments, the soft shuffle of slippers down the corridor as other patients drifted by, all hollow-eyed and silent. Every time the radiation machine hummed to life, I told myself Barbara would walk through the door. I wanted her to see that I was still fighting, to remind her of the boy she'd once teased into staying up all night for study sessions and the man who'd always made space for her dreams, even when mine got smaller to make room. The promise she'd made to stay by my side echoed in my head, louder with every empty chair at my bedside. At first, Barbara tried. She texted reminders about what to eat, sent me memes, tagged me in photos of our favorite college places. She told me about the team at work and the latest office gossip, and I could almost convince myself we were still partners, just navigating a rough patch, not an ending. Then came the missed calls, the meetings that ran late, the excuses that felt like the weather, impossible to predict, impossible to blame. "John, I'm so sorry," she'd whisper when she remembered to check in. "I wish I could be there, but I can't get away." I believed her. I needed to believe her. One afternoon, Jenny found me in the hospital cafeteria, poking at a sandwich I'd lost interest in eating. She slid into the seat across from me, her eyes sharp with concern. "You look worse than last week," she said, not unkindly. I shrugged, forced a smile. "You know Barbara's busy," I said, the words automatic by now. Jenny didn't answer right away. Instead, she offered me an orange and waited while I peeled it, the silence between us filling with everything I couldn't say. Jenny had never liked Barbara. She never said it outright, but I saw it in the way she flinched when Barbara's name came up, the way she steered our conversations elsewhere. "It's not about her being busy," Jenny finally said. It's about you being left alone when you need someone the most. Her words stung because they were true. I tried to laugh it off, but it sounded brittle. You're here, I said, trying to make it a joke. Jenny's face softened. Yeah, well, I'd rather be here with you than anywhere else. After Jenny left, I sat there, peeling another orange, the bitterness on my tongue a reminder that comfort from Jenny wasn't the comfort I craved. I wanted Barbara. I wanted her messy hair and her too loud laugh, her way of making every day feel less ordinary. I wanted her hand in mine, not just in old photographs and fading memories, but wanting her didn't bring her back. The real shift happened the night I got a call from Jason. We'd always been friendly enough, though he was more Barbara's friend than mine, someone she'd met through a networking event, the kind of person who knew everyone's story and never forgot a name. Jason's number lighting up my phone was odd enough, but the reason for his call left my blood cold. Hey John, I just wanted to check in, Jason began, his tone forced casual. Barbara's been struggling, with everything you're going through. He paused. I could hear the sound of traffic behind him. She's been coming to me a lot lately, talking things out. Something in his voice made my stomach tighten. I just wanted to let you know she cares, but it's a lot for her too. I hung up quickly, unsettled. It sounded like he was comforting me, but there was an edge I couldn't ignore. Barbara hadn't mentioned Jason in weeks. The next day, scrolling through her social feed, I saw a photo, Barbara and Jason, side by side at a concert, laughing, drinks in hand. I checked the date. She'd posted it the night I was in the ER, alone, after a reaction to the new meds. She hadn't answered my call that night. She'd texted the next morning, "Sorry, I was out, are you okay?" My parents started noticing the silence too. My mom asked if Barbara was coming to Thanksgiving. I told her Barbara was busy with work. My dad raised an eyebrow, not buying it. "You sure she's not just moving on?" he asked quietly. I hated him for voicing what I was already thinking. Jenny grew more protective as my energy faded. She organized my meds, set alarms on her phone, and walked me through breathing exercises when the pain got too bad. Once, she caught me watching a video Barbara had posted, her and Jason doing karaoke, arms around each other's shoulders, singing off-key and grinning at the camera. "You don't have to keep torturing yourself," Jenny said, her tone gentle. "People show you who they are. It's up to you to believe them." I tried to reach Barbara, desperate for some kind of reassurance, but she never picked up. The voicemail greeting was still the same, the one I'd helped her record last year. Sometimes I'd call just to hear her voice. I'd hang up before the beep. I started to wonder if Barbara even remembered what she'd promised me. The breaking point came when I overheard two nurses in the hallway talking about a woman who visited once and never came back. "You'd think she'd at least check in," one said, not realizing I was listening. "He's still wearing her bracelet, poor guy." I looked down at my wrist, at the woven band Barbara had given me on our last vacation together. It felt childish, suddenly, to keep holding on. A few days later, Barbara finally called. Her voice was bright, almost breathless. "Hey John, I have an interview at that company you told me about. Remember, your dream job? I'm so excited." She paused, waiting for me to share in her enthusiasm. I tried to match her energy, but it felt like lying. "That's great, Barbara, you'll do amazing." She giggled, already distracted. "Jason's been helping me prep. He's really good at this stuff." My stomach twisted, but I forced a smile she couldn't see. "I'm happy for you," I said quietly. After the call, Jenny found me staring at the ceiling, lost in thought. "She called, didn't she?" Jenny asked. I nodded, unable to explain the hollowness in my chest. Jenny sat on the edge of my bed, her eyes steady. "You have to let her go, John." I wanted to argue, to list all the reasons Barbara was just overwhelmed, that she'd come back when things settled down, but the words wouldn't come. I spent the next few days drifting, too tired to feel much of anything. My parents visited, bringing home-cooked food and gentle questions. I let them believe things were fine. I let everyone believe things were fine, but inside, I was building way. Elas, one memory at a time, trying to block out the hurt. I started keeping a notebook, lists of things I needed to do, people I needed to call, reminders to take my meds, to eat, to try. The lists grew longer as my hope grew shorter. One morning, while I waited for Jenny to bring breakfast, Barbara sent a message. "Wish me luck, big day." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the job offer I'd received weeks earlier, the one I'd ignored out of loyalty, out of some misplaced hope that Barbara and I could rebuild what we'd lost. The company had been Barbara's dream, but they wanted me. For the first time, I let myself imagine what life could look like if I chose myself instead of waiting for someone else to come back. When Jenny arrived, she found me at the kitchen table, reviewing the contract. "Are you going to take it?" she asked, her voice quiet but hopeful. I looked at her, at the friend who'd never left, who showed up when it mattered. "Yeah," I said, the word surprising us both with its certainty. "Yeah, I think I am." That night, I accepted the offer. My phone buzzed with a new message from Barbara. A selfie outside the company building, Jason in the background, her smile wide and unburdened. I smiled too, not because I'd won, but because I finally understood what it meant to stop fighting for someone who wouldn't fight for me. On the morning of her interview, I put on my best suit, straightened my tie, and walked into the office with Jenny's encouragement echoing in my mind. Barbara was already in the lobby, nerves visible in the way she checked her reflection, rehearsed answers under her breath, Jason texting her from outside. She saw me, confusion flickering across her face. "John, what are you?" I smiled, handed the receptionist my paperwork, and walked past her into the elevator. As the doors closed, Barbara's shocked reflection faded away, and I felt something inside me settle. The betrayal wasn't the end of my story, it was the beginning of a new one where I chose myself, even if it hurt. The elevator rose, and with every floor, I felt lighter. The days after Barbara's interview announcement felt like treading water in a storm. Every hour seemed stretched thin by anxiety, and every night was filled with replaying old memories and rehearsing conversations that never happened. I told myself I was fine, that taking the job offer was the right move, but it didn't stop the ache that grew with each reminder of Barbara's absence. The apartment was too quiet now. Her laughter used to bounce off the kitchen walls, even on days when she was tired or annoyed with me, and I'd grown so used to her presence that her silence had a weight all its own. I spent hours wandering from room to room, stopping sometimes at the window to watch the city move on without me. Jenny came by every evening, insisting I eat something, sometimes reading aloud from a book while I lay on the couch, other times just sitting beside me in silence. There were moments when I wanted to tell her how lost I felt, but the words stuck somewhere between my chest and throat. I wanted to be strong, or at least pretend, but everything felt like it was slipping out of my hands, my health, my relationship, even my sense of who I was. Some nights I barely slept, haunted by dreams of Barbara standing at the end of my hospital bed, half turned away, her eyes unreadable. I would wake up sweating, heart pounding, struggling to remember that it was over, that she was gone. I'd lie awake in the dark, counting the cracks in the ceiling, listening to my own breathing and wondering how I'd missed the signs. Hadn't I loved her enough? Wasn't I worth staying for, even when things got ugly? The worst part was knowing that I still wanted to call her, still wanted her to walk through the door and tell me it was all a mistake. My fingers hovered over her number a dozen times, but I always stopped short. I told myself it was dignity, self-respect, something noble. In truth, it was just fear that she wouldn't answer, or worse, that she would, and I'd hear in her voice that I'd already been replaced. I tried to focus on work, diving into onboarding paperwork and Zoom calls, trying to carve out some normalcy in the chaos. But even that was a reminder of Barbara. Every corner of the office, every conference call, every project reminded me of how many times we'd talked about working there together. Sometimes I'd catch myself glancing at the empty chair beside me, half expecting her to walk in with a coffee and a grin. When I realized I was doing it, it made me angry at myself for hoping. Jenny, ever patient, never pushed me to talk, but she knew. She noticed the way I stared at my phone after every notification, the way my voice trailed off when someone mentioned Barbara's name. One evening, after a rough day, she brought ice cream and sat across from me, spoon in hand. "You're allowed to be angry, you know," she said softly. "You're allowed to be sad too. You don't have to pretend." I wanted to believe her, but I'd spent so long holding myself together that letting go felt like stepping off a ledge. I started writing again, letters I never intended to send. I filled pages with apologies, accusations, memories, and questions I knew would never get answers. I wrote about our first date, about the trip we'd planned and never taken, about the promises that turned to dust. Sometimes the act of writing brought relief, but most nights it just left me feeling emptier, as if I'd spilled out the last of what I had left inside. The suspense grew as the day of Barbara's interview approached. I saw her posts on social media, outfits laid out, mock interviews with Jason, group texts buzzing with friends wishing her luck. I wondered if she thought of me at all, if my name ever crossed her mind in those moments between rehearsing answers and checking her makeup. Did she remember how much this job had once meant to both of us? Did she know I was going to be there, or was I just a shadow in her rearview mirror now? My parents called more often, sensing something was off. My mother's voice trembled with worry, asking if I was eating, if I was getting enough rest. My father offered awkward reassurances, telling me that better things were coming, that I'd look back on all of this one day and feel proud of how I handled it. I tried to believe them, but my heart wasn't ready. I felt stuck, caught between what I wanted to let go of and what I couldn't help but grieve. The day before the interview, Jenny showed up with takeout and a new playlist. She insisted I put on real clothes, brush my hair, and walk around the block with her. We walked in silence, passing familiar streets that only a few months ago I'd walked with Barbara. At a corner, Jenny stopped and faced me, her expression serious. "It's okay to hurt, John," she said. "But don't let that stop you from moving forward. You deserve a life that isn't about waiting for someone else to show up." That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, studying my reflection. The scars, the hollowed eyes, the changes that illness and heartbreak had left behind, all of it looked unfamiliar, but beneath the exhaustion there was a flicker of something I hadn't felt in months: determination. I put on the suit I'd worn to my last interview, straightened my tie, and told myself that this wasn't just about proving something to Barbara or Jason or anyone else, it was about proving something to myself. Morning came and I barely slept, adrenaline keeping me sharp. On the train, I watched the city speed past and rehearsed what I'd say, how I'd smile, how I'd keep my head up when I walked into that lobby. The suspense was electric and sickening. Part of me dreaded seeing Barbara's face, seeing her surprise or maybe her anger. Part of me wanted her to see me thriving, wanted her to feel even a fraction of what she'd left behind. Most of me just wanted to survive the day, to do my job, to start over. When I finally walked into the office, the world slowed down. Barbara was already there, sitting in the waiting area, back straight, hands clasped over her portfolio. Jason was pacing outside, glancing in every few minutes, as if waiting for news. Barbara saw me, and her mouth fell open. For a heartbeat, everything else faded: the people, the lights, the past months of pain and loss. She stood, the confidence in her posture crumbling for just a moment. I felt both vindicated and suddenly, deeply sad. I hadn't wanted to hurt her, but I couldn't keep losing myself to her absence either. As I handed the receptionist my paperwork and the offer letter, Barbara took a hesitant step toward me, eyes searching my face for something I couldn't give. I nodded to her, forcing a polite smile. She started to speak, but the manager called my name and I turned away, following him down the hall. I felt Jenny's encouragement echoing in my mind, steadying my breath, giving me the strength to keep walking. In that moment, I understood that healing wasn't about erasing the past or pretending the pain never happened. It was about learning to live with it, letting it shape me, but not define me. The suspense, the heartbreak, the uncertainty, it would all pass, eventually. I'd survived worse, I was still here, and for the first time in a long time, that was enough. If I'd thought Barbara's leaving me was the sharpest pain I'd ever feel, I hadn't counted on what the aftermath would be. The morning after my first official day at the new job, I checked my phone to find a string of messages, not from Barbara, but from Jason. They started casual, as if nothing had changed between us. "Hey man, saw you at the office yesterday, didn't realize you'd accepted the offer. Wild coincidence, right?" But then the tone shifted, longer texts, accusations dressed up as concern. "Barbara didn't know you'd be there, she's been through a lot. Maybe give her some space?" The implication was clear: my moving forward was a threat to their comfort. I stared at his words, thumb hovering over the keyboard, but I didn't answer. That day, Barbara avoided me in the office. She slipped into interviews and meetings with her head down, answering questions with a brittle smile, laughter pitched a little too high. I caught her watching me once from across the break room, her eyes flicking away the moment I looked up. When lunch came, I took my food outside, the hum of the city masking the tightness in my chest. This was supposed to be my new start, my chance to rebuild, but the old wounds were too fresh. Every face at the office reminded me of her ambitions. Every congratulation felt like a reminder of what I'd lost. The twist came that afternoon, delivered not by Barbara or Jason, but by the hiring manager himself. He called me into his office, a faintly apologetic smile on his lips. "John, I want you to know you were our top candidate," he said, "but there's something I need to clarify." He handed me a manila folder. Inside were copies of anonymous emails, each one printed and highlighted. The sender hadn't bothered to disguise the writing style, personal attacks, vague accusations, suggestions that I'd misrepresented my qualifications or gotten the offer through you. In fair means. "We get these from time to time, but you should be aware," the manager continued quietly. "We checked everything. Your record is spotless, but I want you to know there's outside pressure." My first reaction was disbelief, quickly followed by a cold certainty. I knew exactly who'd sent the emails. Only Barbara, or someone who wanted to protect her, would bother to dig up old college rumors and twist them into something ugly. It wasn't just about the job, it was about erasing me from the world she wanted for herself. I felt my hands clench, old anger mixing with a newer kind of resolve. "Thank you for telling me," I said, my voice even. "I can assure you everything on my resume is true. If you need anything else, just ask." The manager nodded, his face unreadable, but I sensed his sympathy. After the meeting, I stepped out onto the balcony and tried to catch my breath. Below, the city buzzed with life, oblivious to the drama that played out in one small corner of an office building. I wondered if Barbara was proud of herself, or if she felt even a flicker of guilt. Did she know how far Jason was willing to go for her? Or was this his idea, another way to sweep away the past and clear a path for their new life together? That night, Jenny called. She must have heard the exhaustion in my voice. "What happened?" she asked. I hesitated, not wanting to drag her into it, but the words spilled out anyway. She listened in silence, letting me rant about betrayals and office politics and the impossibility of starting over when the past wouldn't stay buried. "You know what you need to do," Jenny said finally, her voice steady. "Show up. Do the job better than anyone else. Let your work be the answer. Don't let their bitterness become your baggage." Her words settled over me like a warm blanket, steadying my nerves. I realized that as long as I kept looking backward, at Barbara, at Jason, at every accusation tossed my way, I'd never actually move forward. Jenny's support had been the only constant in months of uncertainty, and I wasn't about to lose myself to someone else's campaign against me. The next day, I went in early. I shook hands, answered questions, and helped a colleague solve a tricky problem before noon. I saw Barbara in the hallway, her face tense, and I offered a simple, polite nod. Jason texted again, but I left his messages unread. By lunchtime, the office chatter had shifted away from rumors and drama back to the work itself. My manager sent a message to the team praising my quick thinking and teamwork. It felt like oxygen. But the real turning point wasn't vindication at work or silence from Barbara. It was seeing Jenny waiting outside the building at the end of the day. She leaned against a lamppost, arms folded, hair windblown, a patient smile on her lips. "I figured you might want some company," she said. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. For the first time, the ache in my chest loosened a little. I realized that Barbara's attempts to sabotage me couldn't touch what actually mattered, the people who showed up, the work I was proud of, and the future I was finally willing to claim for myself. The next morning, the manager called me in again, this time with good news. The higher-ups had reviewed everything and decided not only to keep me, but to assign me to a high-visibility project. "We want you on the front lines," he said. "We trust you." Barbara's schemes had backfired. Her bitterness only made my strength stand out. Word spread through the office, and by lunchtime, even those who'd been wary before now came to congratulate me. I glanced across the break room and caught Barbara watching, her expression caught between envy and regret. That was the twist. In trying to erase me, Barbara and Jason had made me impossible to ignore. Their actions had thrown me into the spotlight, and I'd risen to meet it. Jenny squeezed my shoulder as I walked back to my desk. "See," she whispered, "you're more than what they left behind." And for the first time since radiation, I almost believed it. The office shimmered with summer heat that week, but the temperature between Barbara and me had dropped below zero. Every corridor was another battlefield of glances, every staff meeting a chessboard. Barbara avoided me when she could, showing up late to team huddles, retreating into corners, phone always clutched in her hand like a lifeline. Her nervous energy spread through the department, infecting the atmosphere. I caught whispers in the kitchen, in the elevator, people picking sides in a conflict nobody could name out loud. Most days, I focused on the work, but sometimes, in the pause between emails and phone calls, I'd feel the chill of old pain. The real confrontation didn't come in a dramatic showdown but built up like a summer storm, tension thickening in the air. It began with a meeting, just Barbara, me, our manager, and 2 department heads. The project was critical, a partnership that could define the company's quarter, and, by some cruel twist, Barbara and I were assigned to present our findings together. I could almost hear the cosmic laughter. My hands shook as I organized my notes, determined not to give Barbara the satisfaction of seeing me flustered. Barbara arrived late, eyes red-rimmed, hair a little frayed. She kept her gaze averted, flipping through her files with forced composure. The meeting began, and the room became a pressure cooker. Our manager ran through the agenda, then handed the floor to Barbara and me. I stood, nerves jangling, and started my presentation. My voice was steady, my arguments clear, months of preparation and years of experience coalescing into sharp focus. I knew the numbers, the strategy, the story behind the slides. But as I finished my section and gestured to Barbara, she hesitated, her usual confidence faltering. She stumbled over her first few lines, eyes darting from her notes to the department heads, then finally to me. For the first time, I saw something raw in her expression, a flicker of regret, or maybe just exhaustion. I willed myself to look neutral, professional, but inside, my heart was pounding. We were both exposed, everything we'd been hiding simmering just beneath the surface. Barbara powered through the rest of her part, voice rising with practiced certainty, but her hands shook as she clicked through the final slide. As the QA began, a department head asked a question that was clearly outside her prep. She looked at me, lost for a split second. Out of pure instinct, or maybe muscle memory from all the times I'd backed her up in college, I answered for her, concise and respectful. I saw her relief, then a flash of something deeper. Gratitude, perhaps, or shame. The meeting ended with a round of polite applause. Our manager smiled, praised our teamwork, and sent everyone out with promises of bonuses if the project landed. As the others left, Barbara and I lingered in the room, neither willing to be the first to move. The door clicked shut behind the last department head. Silence ballooned between us. Barbara stared down at the conference table. "You didn't have to help me," she said, voice barely above a whisper. I leaned back, exhaustion weighing on my shoulders. "I wasn't going to let you fail, Barbara. I'm not that person." Her hands twisted together. "I know what you think of me, and you're right. I left you when you needed me. I made everything about me, Jason." She stopped, swallowing hard, her words stuck. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I thought I wanted all this, but..." I shook my head, emotion rising in my throat. "You did what you wanted, Barbara. That's always been your way. I just finally realized it wasn't about me being not enough. It was about you needing to be everything, all the time, even if it meant burning everything behind you." Tears welled in her eyes. "I never meant to hurt you, but you were so strong, John. You never needed anyone." I almost laughed at that, a sound halfway between pain and release. "I needed you more than anyone, Barbara. I just stopped asking for help because you stopped showing up. Jenny was there when you couldn't be." Barbara wiped her eyes, voice trembling. "Jenny is a better person than I'll ever be." The truth hung between us, brittle and sharp. For a moment, we were just 2 people sitting at a table, stripped of pride and pretense. She tried to find words, but they failed her. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words barely audible. I nodded. "I know. But I'm not sorry for how things turned out. For the first time, I'm actually living my own life. I forgave you already. I forgave myself, too." Barbara nodded, blinking back more tears. For a long moment, there was nothing left to say. Then, as if by mutual agreement, we stood. She walked out first, shoulders squared but head bowed, and I watched her go. There was no triumph in it, only a deep, final ache, a closing of a door I'd been holding open for too long. After the meeting, the office buzzed with news of our successful presentation. People stopped me in the hall to congratulate me. The manager called me into his office to offer a lead role on a new project. Even as the accolades came, I felt something shift inside, a sense of release, of peace. Later that day, Jenny texted. "Heard you killed it in the meeting, proud of you." I invited her to dinner to celebrate, and for the first time, it wasn't about filling the silence, but actually wanting to share my happiness. We sat across from each other in a small restaurant, the city lights flickering outside, and Jenny listened as I recounted the day, the confrontation, the relief, the moment I realized the past didn't own me anymore. She smiled. "You always had it in you, John. You just needed a reason to see it." I thought about everything that had brought me to this point, the sickness, the heartbreak, the betrayals, the nights spent wondering if anything would ever feel right again. I thought about Barbara's ambition, Jason's envy, Jenny's steadfastness. I thought about the difference between people who show up for you and people who only show up for themselves. For a long moment, we sat in companionable silence. Then Jenny reached across the table, her hand warm in mine. I didn't pull away. The realization was gentle, not a lightning strike, but a sunrise. I could choose where my story went next. In the weeks that followed, Barbara withdrew from the project and, soon after, from the company altogether. Jason went with her, chasing a different opportunity in another city. Gossip faded, replaced by the usual churn of office life. People moved on, but the echoes of that confrontation lingered in the way my colleagues trusted me, the way my manager gave me more responsibility, the way Jenny and I settled into an easy rhythm that felt nothing like the uncertainty I'd once called love. One afternoon, as I packed up after another long but satisfying day, Barbara sent a final email. It wasn't dramatic, just a simple note. "You deserved better. I hope you find it. Thank you for helping me see myself clearly, even if it hurts." I stared at the screen for a long time, then replied with only 2 words. "Take care." Afterward, Jenny and I went for a walk along the river. The city was alive with summer, the air thick with hope. We talked about everything and nothing, about plans for the future, about the ways people grow and change, about the possibility of letting go. For the first time since Barbara walked out on me, I didn't look for her in the crowd. Instead, I looked ahead. The biggest moment of confrontation wasn't the shouting or the drama, but the quiet acceptance that comes when you finally let go. I learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting, it's about refusing to let someone else's choices shape your life any longer. I learned that starting over isn't a weakness, but a kind of strength. I learned that sometimes, walking away is the bravest thing you'll ever do. As the sky turned deep blue and the first stars appeared, Jenny squeezed my hand and smiled at me. I felt a warmth spreading in my chest that had nothing to do with the past and everything to do with what I wanted now. I was no longer someone left behind, I was someone moving forward, scars and all, ready for whatever came next. The summer that Barbara left for good, everything around me seemed to come into sharper focus. The days grew longer, but I no longer measured time by the empty space in my apartment or the absence of her voice in my ear. Instead, I marked my days with progress. I was growing stronger, the radiation burns on my skin faded to pale lines, and I got my appetite back. Each morning, I woke up with Jenny's messages on my phone, reminders to eat, encouragement before work, sometimes just a silly meme to make me laugh. The city felt new again, as if all the parts of it that had belonged to Barbara had been handed back to me. At work, the shadow Barbara and Jason left behind evaporated faster than I expected. The project Barbara and I had presented became a success, drawing attention from the regional office. The department head offered me the project lead permanently. I accepted without hesitation, feeling the weight of my own ambition settling around my shoulders. My confidence grew with each meeting, each deadline met, each problem solved with my own hands. My name started circulating through the company, but now it was my work they talked about, not my drama. One morning, I arrived at the office to find an envelope on my desk. Inside was a thank you card from the CEO, a personal note for handling the recent transition with remarkable professionalism and vision. He invited me to present our project to the executive board. I could hardly believe how far I'd come from the man who once sat in the hospital staring at his phone, waiting for a message from someone who'd already moved on. It was my moment, and nobody could take it from me. That same week, news began to circulate that Barbara and Jason's new venture had collapsed spectacularly. Word spread through industry channels that their launch event had gone sideways, funds mismanaged, partners pulling out, and clients backing away as stories about unprofessional behavior and dishonesty surfaced. Someone from Barbara's old team let slip at a networking event that Jason had been caught exaggerating his credentials to a key investor, and Barbara, instead of taking responsibility, tried to blame a junior associate. Within days, their reputation was in ruins. Nobody in the city startup world would touch them now. For a while, I kept waiting for Barbara to reach out, to try and pull me into the mess, or to demand an apology or explanation she didn't deserve. Instead, the only message I received was from an unknown number. Jason, I guessed by the tone. If you have any decency left, John, you'll tell people we were good at what we did. You owe us that much. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Jenny, ever steady, helped me keep my focus forward. We started spending more time together outside of work, quiet dinners, long walks in the park, slow mornings with coffee and gentle conversation. Jenny never asked for more than I was ready to give, but her presence filled the empty spaces in my life that Barbara had left behind. She believed in me even when I still doubted myself. With her, I began to remember who I was before heartbreak, someone who found joy in small victories, who laughed easily, who could look at the world and see hope instead of loss. The presentation for the executive board was scheduled on the same day Barbara's failed company made headlines for all the wrong reasons. That morning, I dressed with care, choosing the same suit I'd worn to my very first interview, the one Barbara had once said made me look serious, but kind. I looked in the mirror and saw a man who had survived every worst day he'd imagined, and came out stronger. The boardroom was bright and imposing, filled with executives who barely glanced at me as I set up. But when I began my presentation, the room grew quiet. I walked them through the strategy, the results, the ways our project had outperformed every expectation. I answered their questions with calm authority, drawing from the months of hard work, and every answer was rooted in evidence, not bluster or charm. By the end, even the most skeptical director was nodding along. Afterwards, the CEO pulled me aside. John, we're planning to expand this project to our national offices. We'd like you to head the rollout. It was everything I'd wanted, a chance to make my mark on the company, to turn the worst season of my life into something meaningful. I accepted, feeling a weight lift that I hadn't realized I was still carrying. Later that afternoon, as I left the building, I saw Barbara waiting across the street. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes hidden behind sunglasses, but I'd have recognized her anywhere. For a moment, I almost crossed to her, old reflexes tugging at my heart. Instead, I stopped and watched as she paced, clearly debating whether to approach me. She dialed her phone, glanced at me, and then looked away. Defeated, I felt nothing but relief. She sent a single text that night. If you ever cared about me, please tell them it wasn't all my fault. I stared at her message, remembering all the times I'd twisted myself into knots trying to save her from her own mistake. All the times I'd paid for her peace of mind with my own. Then I deleted the text, blocked her number, and put my phone away. Closure wasn't something she could give me, or that I owed her. I'd earned it myself. Jenny came over that evening, her arms full of groceries and her face lit with a smile. We cooked together, laughed together, moved through my apartment with a quiet ease that felt both new and familiar. When I told her about the board's decision, she hugged me tightly, then kissed my cheek, whispering, "I knew you'd do it, I never doubted you." The next morning, news broke that the CEO had issued a statement about hiring practices, specifically denouncing the sort of behavior that had tanked Barbara and Jason's company. My project was named as the gold standard for integrity and innovation, and my name was mentioned in the article. LinkedIn requests, emails, and congratulations poured in. For the first time, I felt like I belonged at the center of my own story. With Jenny at my side, I finally allowed myself to look ahead. We started planning a vacation, just the two of us, something slow and beautiful, a chance to celebrate surviving, healing, and moving on. My parents, relieved to hear the change in my voice, began calling less to check on me and more to share their own lives. Even my doctors noticed the difference. My health improved, my energy returned, and the last traces of illness receded into the past. One evening, as Jenny and I watched the sun set from a rooftop, I asked her what she saw in me now. She smiled and brushed my hair from my eyes. "I see someone who let go of what hurt him and became everything he was meant to be." Weeks later, Barbara's name surfaced in the news again, but now only as a cautionary tale, a story of ambition, betrayal, and consequences. I felt a pang of sadness for her, but not regret. Her story was no longer mine to fix. I took Jenny's hand and squeezed it, feeling the reality of my new life settle around me. I thought back to the worst days, lying in the radiation room, heartbroken, convinced that I had nothing left to hope for. I remembered the feeling of being left behind, of being made to believe I was only worthy if someone else said so. I remembered the shame, the anger, the pain of betrayal. And then I let it all go. The ultimate revenge was not humiliation or confrontation, but happiness. True closure wasn't in making Barbara or Jason pay, but in building a life so full, so rich with honesty and love, that their absence felt like a blessing. Their downfall wasn't my triumph, but my refusal to participate in their drama, my focus on building, on healing, on loving those who truly stood by me, that was. As the city lights flickered on below, Jenny leaned against me, and we watched the stars come out. My story wasn't about Barbara anymore, or even about survival. It was about becoming someone strong enough to thrive. It was about walking into my future, offer letter in hand, with the past behind me and my heart finally free.